In part 1 of revisiting Exo-Force, we explored the sets that laid the foundation for this very unique LEGO theme. Uplink and Sentry, Stealth Hunter and Grand Titan, Thunder Fury and Fire Vulture, Supernova, Sonic Phantom, and Gate Assault. The January wave of sets established consistent styles and color schemes for the vehicles and introduced us to our lineup of heroes and villains. As we've seen with other themes, the following summer wave usually takes things up a notch, getting larger and more expansive playsets out on shelves ahead of the Christmas season. Wave 2 of Exo-Force is no exception to the tried and true formula, and this particular line brought us some of the largest sets we'd ever get out of the theme's 3-year lifespan. If you're familiar with Power Miners though, you might know that bigger isn't always better. While revisiting that series, I found the larger Wave 2 sets to often be a touch disappointing, and I still much prefer the theme's smaller original Wave 1 sets. However, I think you'll be delighted to see that Exo-Force does a much better job of sticking the landing, and that among these 4 sets are some of the best that Exo-Force has to offer. Folks, today I can confidently say that you're in for a treat, so let's explore the secrets that these incredible 4 sets have to offer. In the larger Exo-Force story, the Wave 2 sets are primarily featured in Greg Farshtey's second Exo-Force novel, Attack of the Robots. The book chronicles the robots' largest attack against Sentai Fortress with the creation of their ultimate weapon, the Striking Venom battle machine. If Sentai Fortress were to fall, the robots would be able to gain control of the entire mountain. We'll be getting back to Striking Venom very soon, but first we need to cover the smallest of the Wave's 4 sets, the Mobile Defense Tank. Smallest hardly seems an appropriate word to describe the 365-piece battle machine, but the sets actually only get bigger from here. Mobile Defense Tank was launched in June of 2006 for $29.99 and includes 2 minifigures. In the comics, it's explained that Rio designed and built the tank with the help of his battle machine Uplink. When Uplink is captured by a Fire Vulture and taken over to the robot half of the mountain, Rio uses the Mobile Defense Tank to rescue his beloved battle machine and also happens to rescue a miner named Swift along the way. While the set, nor the comics for that matter, name the gunner included in this set, I like to think of him as being Swift himself. The figure is identical to the gunner included with last wave's Gate Assault, and because of his relative rarity and the ability of him to be army built, the price of gunners tends to be much higher than the other human minifigures from the theme. Someone else pointed out to me that the price of gunners might also be higher due to the fact that the hairpiece is used in a relatively rare Batman figure, Nightwing from the original Arkham Asylum. This set also includes Rio, of course, who is unchanged from his appearance in 7708 Uplink. Mobile Defense Tank is a pretty big deviation from the standard mechs that we've seen up until this point, but it is a nice change of pace. It's a great upgrade for Rio, who is now able to join in the fight, rather than just taking Uplink to repair things on the side. This particular battle machine does make a brief appearance in the second novel, where Rio uses it to try and find a weakness on Striking Venom, before it is quickly taken out and never heard from again. It makes for a very intimidating looking battle machine, armed to the teeth with all sorts of cannons and lasers and all sorts of fun stuff. It's definitely worth pointing out a new shooting system that was developed for the second wave of sets, the disc launchers. If you've ever watched any reviews for a Wave 2 set from the theme before, I'm guessing you know that these particular shooters are not well loved, and not without reason. With nothing securing the discs in place, they easily fall out of the top and the bottom. Firing the discs is also very inconsistent and frustrating to work with. One thing's for sure though, the dual injection discs themselves are quite beautiful. Here they're made with lime and yellow plastics, and we'll also be seeing red and yellow discs used by the robots in later sets. Because of the many issues with the system, the launchers and discs would be discontinued after 2007, but would find their way into a few sets outside of Exo-Force. One set we've even looked at here before on the channel, and that's Mars Mission's Claw Tank Ambush. The red-yellow discs also would appear in another set, the Air Temple from Avatar: The Last Airbender. In terms of other interesting parts, Mobile Defense Tank is actually the only set to have ever included a 1x10 brick in orange. Go figure. You can do some proper funky things when it comes to posing the model, which I think is kind of fun. You can imagine this going over a variety of different terrain. You can even do that. It can be pretty tall. In the front, the gunner drives the vehicle from a pretty spacious cockpit, probably one of the nicest ones we'll see throughout the entire theme. He's got plenty of guns to control there too. The side armor can actually be posed as connected through ball joints, interestingly enough, and it looks to have plenty of missiles on either side. So again, you can create some more interesting looks out of these and also aim these a bit, I suppose. And then on top, we've got Rio himself with the biggest gun of all and the disc launcher. And off to the side here actually is one of the light bricks. Unlike all the battle machines that we saw in Wave 1, this one cannot be easily removed, and I think we can just attribute that to Rio's genius when it comes to designing a battle machine. Around the back there are some posable exhaust pipes here with some flames shooting out of them. And all around there's some pretty great sticker detailing too. Probably too much stickers for such a small set, but that's kind of par for the course when it comes to Exo-Force. Again, just like so many other Exo-Force sets, it's amazing that so much was done with so little. A $30 set this big. It's the biggest vehicle we've seen so far, but like I said, they're only going to get bigger from here, which is pretty incredible. Oh, and I should mention too that all the Wave 2 sets, much like the Wave 1 sets of Exo-Force, do have alternate builds. Mobile Defense Tanks is called Advanced Tactical Unit and makes for a very different take on the tank. In addition to the alternate build though, Mobile Defense Tank also has a combo build with Sentai Fortress. The instructions for this model, Magna-Link, were originally introduced in the Brickmaster magazine. Next on our list is the legendary Striking Venom, the strongest vehicle of the robot fleet, the one meant to overthrow the humans once and for all. Described in the books as having 60-foot tall legs and claws that could grip any terrain, on its surface the battle machine truly seems intimidating. The set includes 646 pieces and would have cost $50 back in 2006, or about $75 today. Most of the set's 7 minifigures are quite familiar. They're just regular iron drones, though it is great to get so many in one set. Great for building up that epic robot army. But let's talk about Mecha 1. Mecha 1 was the first robot to rebel against the humans and now leads the entire robot rebellion on Sentai Mountain. He believes it's the robot's right to rule as they are superior to the humans. To keep himself safe, Mecha 1 has created clones of himself so that he can never truly be defeated. The minifigure itself is beautifully done with dual injection molding like some of the Devastators we saw in the last wave, but this time with a mix of pearl gold and black. So funnily enough, in the earliest versions of this set, you did not get a complete Mecha 1. He did not come with his legs. He is just clipped into the base of his cockpit with standard 1x1 clips. Now apparently, and perhaps unsurprisingly, this rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and LEGO customer service began to receive a number of complaints about, hey, my golden legs are missing. Where are they? From what I've heard, later runs of Striking Venom eventually did include the legs of Mecha 1. But the earliest copies of the set, like the one my brother and I had as kids growing up, did not have legs. And so you've got half a Mecha 1 in this set. The lack of legs here has always confused me. It wouldn't have taken too much modification to make him fit with the legs, but it just didn't happen. Thankfully, the next two sets do include full-legged versions of the minifigure. According to the novels, the Striking Venom is covered everywhere in thick armor and is nearly indestructible. It's only directly underneath it with all of its power that Takeshi's Grand Titan is able to bring it down once and for all. But I do think the designers' attempts to make this the biggest thing ever have left it a little skeletal in places. I mean, when I look at this thing, I don't exactly think, wow, that's the most armored looking vehicle of all time. I mean, look at these legs. They are literally just a brick thick in a lot of places. A brick and a plate thick in others. It definitely doesn't look strong. And I think the biggest downside of this model in particular is just its lack of posability. The legs can be moved like this, which is a thing, I guess, but they can't go up. You can't really walk this thing around, which is kind of disappointing. You can even see in the commercial, the kid just drags it towards Sentai Fortress, which kind of looks a bit ridiculous. But there are a lot of things about this model that I like. For instance, the ability to deploy iron drones from the legs down onto the battlefield is actually pretty fantastic. And the fact that there's so many iron drones too. It's a great army building set. You can get some fun movement out of the set by controlling the angle of the cockpit, the spinning massive turrets up top, and you can even open up this interior section by moving the windscreens back, and I don't know, having some sort of top secret robot meeting in here. This central gun thing going on in the middle is especially interesting. Those massive guns are actually being held in place by a Devastator body combined with Technic. It is some of the craziest parts usage I've ever seen. And it doesn't exactly work great. There's not a lot of friction there in those arms, and so the guns tend to fall over pretty easily if you don't have everything set up perfectly, but it's just such an interesting concept that I have to love it. The power brick for the set actually lights up the Devastator's eyes, or would have at some point in its life. Again, another really fun use of parts for this really strange assembly. This set gives us our first version of the red-yellow disc launcher, and there's nothing different in the way this one operates compared to mobile defense tanks. It doesn't work great, but boy, those discs are beautiful. Even if the set isn't perfect, I do enjoy the aesthetic of it quite a bit. The color scheme is great. The trans neon greens, the dark greens, the black. It fits right in with the robot fleet. And I think the stickers too add a lot of great detail, especially on these windscreens. I wonder what happens if you scan that barcode. Someone needs to try that. The size alone is so insane, it's hard not to be impressed, especially considering this was a $50 set. I mean, let's be real, LEGO would definitely be charging $100+ for this today. This interior bit is kind of interesting too. I really like what they've done with the Iron Drones, how they are literally hooked up to the machines, controlling it with their brains. I think that's pretty fantastic. A concept that I would have liked to have seen expanded upon in other sets, but I think this is the only time that it appears. Ultimately, I think Striking Venom was a great idea, but it just fell apart a bit in the execution. It's just missing some glaringly obvious things that would have helped it live up to its title as the strongest robot creation ever devised. There also is an alternate build for Striking Venom, though I think it's the weakest out of all the alternate builds in Exo-Force. There are some cool parts of this though, like the rack of iron drones, which very much reminds me of Star Wars battle droids from the MTT. And that brings us to the big one, the largest set of the entire theme, Sentai Fortress. In fact, the set would have been the second largest set released in all of 2006, only falling behind the Technic tow truck with its 1,877 pieces. Considering the sheer mass of this model, it's kind of crazy to think that it would have sold for $100 back in 2006, or about $150 adjusted for inflation. The set probably has some of the best value ever seen from a LEGO set. Not only do you get the massive fortress, but the set also includes two large battle machines. Sentai Fortress includes many familiar faces. The complete core team of Exo-Force pilots is represented with Takeshi, Hikaru, Ryo, and Yato. There are plenty of robots too, with two Iron Drones, Mecha 1 again, and something completely bizarre and brand new, a Venom Walker, a strange half battle machine, half robot creature. If you're interested, it appears you can buy individual Venom Walkers on a Bricklink, though I imagine you may be better off just buying the parts instead. The set also includes our first Sensei Kaiken. He was responsible for designing the first battle machines and also the first robots. He now serves as a mentor and father figure for the pilots. I am somehow going to try to cover everything that this set has to offer in a reasonable amount of time. Needless to say, this thing is absolutely insane. Let's take a look at the two mechs that are included here, starting with Silent Strike. Silent Strike is given to Hikaru after his successful rescue of Takeshi's family from the robot side of the mountain. It's very much an upgraded version of his original Stealth Hunter, but this time it's faster, though the armor is thinner, though you wouldn't get that impression from looking at it. Silent Strike makes use of the same base that was introduced with Supernova, so it's a slightly larger version of the standard mech. Like Supernova, the amount of detail that's been able to be put into this particular mech is incredible, and it easily is one of my favorite mechs for the Exo-Force. I love the melee weapon too, which makes use of some wonderful classic Knights Kingdom swords here done in blue, and also it does label them as having sharp edges, which is very nice of it to do so. The robot mech included in the set has been given the name Venom 1. It's Mecha 1's personal mech, which he uses to storm the fortress here. This time around, we do get, of course, a full Mecha 1, which is great. And the Venom 1 that he pilots here is actually quite interesting. The legs are made in the same style of the other mechs, but the top is very unique. The top half can actually rotate at the hip, which is super nice, and there's all sorts of weird poses that you can get out of the upper section here. It's all hinged on Technic pins rather than the familiar Galador joint system. At first you would think that would be some sort of limitation straying away from that system, but I think first of all, it makes the thing look really unique. And with that hip pose ability, I think you actually get the same range on your weapons that you would using the traditional format. I like this one a lot, and man, is it decked out in weapons. And then the fortress itself, I mean, wow. First we have the front gate, which I think is just a great, huge shape. It's actually tall enough that you can fit the human mechs underneath it pretty easily. Silent Strike is a bit tall with its fins, but you can make it work. The frame is made up of this piece here, which I'm most familiar with from LEGO City's XXL mobile crane, but this time stickered up and done in orange. The doors are pretty flimsy. I think that's just so that they can be rammed down if you want. But I mean, just the sheer size of the gate like this is so cool. The only other gate that I think can rival the size of this is the Jurassic Park one. Otherwise, you just don't see stuff like this from LEGO too often. Connecting all four corners of the model are these little monorails, and each has its own little car on them. This one has, again, one of the legendary disc launchers. They aren't locked down or anything, it's just held in place on each side by a 1x3 brick, but it can slide from slide to slide to get things from one tower to another. And that brings us to our first tower. Up top we have this really fun looking exosuit for Hayato. It's very similar to the polybags that we covered in the last video, but this time appearing in an official set. Poor Hayato always seems to get the short end of the stick with the smallest battle machines. Even in the books, he's hardly ever mentioned, which is so strange. But then he gets like a whole book to himself, and it is the best book, but we'll cover that later on. Beneath him is the med bay, which actually makes use of a really cool looking medical bed build. It's hooked up to a light brick and a magnifying glass, which can quickly heal any injuries that the Exo-Force team might sustain. We can take the next monorail, which is simply 2 seats, to travel on to the repair bay. This was always my favorite section of the Fortress. There's just so much going on here and so much to do. You can fit any of the mechs in here, including the rather large Supernova and Silent Strike, and go about repair work. There's plenty of tools to choose from. There's a little computer screen with a blueprint on it and a rather fun chair design. In the back is a giant fan, the same one that appeared in Sonic Phantom and Fire Vulture from last wave. And there's all sorts of platforms and ladders and so many ways to get in and around this mech to make the repair work just seem really convincing and fun to play around with. And to top it all off, there is a crane up top which can slide from side to side and be manned by a single minifigure. I really do think this is all great. There's just a lot of fun to be had in this section, and the fact that you can fit even the biggest of mechs in here is very satisfying. The pieces that make up the side are very interesting. I remember that again from another LEGO City construction set. This massive hauler, where in that set they appeared in light bluish gray. I'd love to get my hands on those pieces at some point. As you can see though, the plastic here is much softer than the typical ABS, and these things bend, warp, and scrape like nobody's business, which is kind of unfortunate. But I have managed to use these in a mock before, and I think I saw some on New Hashima at Brickworld this summer. So they're popular pieces, really cool and versatile, and they've got all sorts of pinholes too, so there are plenty of connection points. Moving around the back, we've got another monorail to travel over. This one's carrying a single bomb in a crate, which is pretty cool. I love the bomb design. It's simple, 5 pieces, but it works so well. That brings us to the armory on the first floor of this tower. It's got these really interesting brick-built guns, making use of a variety of really bizarre pieces to make something super unique and quite elegant. And there's another crate with some missiles in it. And above that is the watchtower. Not too much going on here. You can open it up, and it is pretty well covered with some glass, so you feel relatively safe up here. There's 2 minifigure seats and a control panel too, and of course, more guns. Guys, it's Exo-Force, there's gotta be guns. Oh, and speaking of guns, the last monorail does have yet another gun and one of those missiles that we saw in the armory. So once you launch it, you can stock up on more and get back to shooting at the baddies. But yeah, I can't stress it enough, and in case you didn't figure it out, like this thing is really big. Fully enclosed, So much to do. You get two very substantial battle machines. One the size of Supernova, the largest battle machine from Last Wave, and the other is, I would say, the size of a standard $15 mech from Last Wave. You get the entire team of Exo-Force pilots and their mentor. And there's enough room inside this thing, if you really open it up, to probably house the entire first wave of mechs in here. It sounds ridiculous, but if you did for some reason get multiple of this set, you could probably combine them together to make an even bigger base. This thing is the perfect Exo-Force set. Easily one of my top 10 sets of all time. So many good memories with playing with this thing. This is the kind of set that I wish LEGO would do more of these days, where you get everything in that one big set. Today it feels like you have to get every single set in a wave to get the entire lineup of figures, or you just need everything to play out a compelling story. Not so with Sentai Fortress. This gave you every single minifigure. I mean, the only thing you don't get is like an entire Devastator. You're missing legs on the Devastator, but you get Mecha 1, you get the Iron Drones, you get part of the Devastator, the entire lineup of the Exo-Force pilots, you get the massive base, you get the good guy mech, you get the bad guy mech. What else could you want? Figure that all of this right here today would have cost $150 adjusted for inflation. You can fit 2 modular buildings inside of this fortress, no problem. I mean, for comparison, look, here we got Monkey Kid, the Azure line, $80 set. So this guy here, half the price of what this fortress would have cost. And I mean, he's not that different in size from Silent Strike. Obviously, a lot more pieces, a lot more sturdy, but same amount of play value as just a very small portion of this set. So you can see how the design philosophy has changed over the years, where there is a much bigger focus on stability and aesthetic, but somewhere along the way, LEGO lost sight of the fun. Because, what? You want 2 of these? 2 of these? Or do you want Sentai Fortress? I know the choice that everyone's going to make. I do love this set though. It's beautiful. The alternate build for Sentai Fortress is plenty interesting too. You actually end up keeping some significant portions of the build together, including the walls. Each individual mech becomes its own alternate build too, which is a really great use of parts. And both alternate mech builds create pretty epic flying machines. That does leave us with one last set though, a limited edition release from October of 2006, Bridgewalker vs. White Lightning. The set sold for $49.99 and includes 657 pieces and 4 minifigures. We get Hayato, 2 Devastators to man the guns of the Bridgewalker, and Mecha 1 to pilot the massive battle machine. In the comics, the Bridgewalker was developed in secret for a surprise attack on the human side of the mountain, making use of an old abandoned bridge. The plan almost works, but is thwarted by Hayato and his upgraded battle machine, the White Lightning. Let's take a look at White Lightning a little closer first. White Lightning is significantly different from the other mechs of this era, and even though it uses the same Galador joint system, it is pretty much different in every other way. In some places that works, in some places that doesn't so much. It's interesting to note that this battle machine doesn't have a power brick and must be powered in some other unidentified way. We do have one of the launchers off to the side just mounted onto the arm, which makes posing the arm rather difficult because if you angle it down, those discs, they're gonna fall out. But instead of hands, he just has big guns. Gotta love Exo-Force. Perhaps the most ridiculous part of this model is just these loose fins on the side, made of some good old Jack Stone pieces there. One advantage that this particular mech has over some of the others is the ability to rotate at the waist. Up top, the armor is attached simply by 1 clip on each side, which is just really bizarre connection, but it does kind of work, I guess. It just falls off really easily. And also there's some sand blue there. There's a sand blue chair-like piece in the cockpit. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't think I can think of any other sand blue elements in the theme, so I guess that's kind of noteworthy. Wait, nope, that was a dumb Fire Vulture. Fire Vulture's all sorts of sand blue. Only sand blue for the good guys. Let's go with that. Ultimately, though, I'm not going to judge this vehicle too harshly because it is a side vehicle to the much superior, much more intimidating Bridgewalker. Now, if I had no knowledge of Exo-Force and you put this and Striking Venom side by side, I would have assumed this one would be the battle machine designed to take out the humans on Sentai Mountain. This thing is terrifying and so well armored, especially on the feet and the legs. They make use of all sorts of crazy pieces angled and layered on top of each other in fascinating ways that I think really embodies that robot aesthetic that we've gotten used to. Each side of the Bridgewalker has some proper intimidating weapons manned individually by Devastators. They're also attached to the Galador joints, so you can get some great posability out of those. And I love this flex tube going up in here. Just details like that really make this special. Like, what even is this? What does it do? It's terrifying. It's awesome. We also have one of those spring-loaded shooters, which is great, so you get some actual firepower out of this thing. It's not all just in your imagination. And then we get to the cockpit itself, which is manned by Mecha 1. Another legged version of the minifigure, which is always great. This head, again, has such great angles and parts usage. It has 2 light bricks connected to the fiber optic tubing, which weave their way around this really beautifully. There's also some great use of bionicle pieces here with the Vizirac feet and eyes in 2 different colors of all things too. Yeah, this thing looks so epic. It's so sweet. Though, you have to admit, very impractical. That's a lot of weight to balance on 2 feet. It wouldn't take much to take this one out, probably, and that's actually exactly what happens in the comics. And then there's the other disappointing thing. Those legs don't move at all. They can bend in and out, but you can't, I guess you can walk like that. You know what? That's still better than Striking Venom, so I'll take it. Oh, something just fell off. It might not be a perfect set. That title belongs to the beautiful Sentai Fortress, but I think this is probably my favorite looking battle machine in the entirety of Exo-Force, especially for the robot side. There's so much character here, so much great parts usage. To me, this will always be the ultimate robot vehicle. It was a great concept with much better execution, I think, than Striking Venom. And of course, there's an alternate build for Bridgewalker versus White Lightning, giving us both a robot flying battle machine and a human flying battle machine, the Raven Attacker and the Fire Eagle. These look pretty sweet, honestly. And I love how parts of Devastators become detailing on the Raven Attacker. So that there is Wave 2 of LEGO Exo-Force. It really is a wave that delivered after the high bar set by the January wave of Exo-Force sets. I'm not going to sit here and pick a favorite over one or the other. I think what's so great about these 2 particular first wave of Exo-Force sets is that they work so well together. Both bring something to the table that the other doesn't have. Of course, Wave 2, it brings the size and the grander scale of the battles, but you can't have that without having the smaller mechs of the first wave and those more personal battles and stories. In a lot of ways, Exo-Force reminds me of Knight's Kingdom 2, in that there is just this incredible rabbit hole of information, comics, lore to find yourself buried in. I was able to get a large chunk of the information and assets for this video by using the very well loved and cared for Exo-Force wiki. And if you want to learn more about the theme, I think that's definitely the place to go to, where so much information has been painstakingly preserved for us to enjoy and appreciate all these years later. But guys, we're not even halfway done with our Exo-Force experience. There are 3 more waves of sets to go. And in the next Revisiting Exo-Force video, we'll be taking the journey to the legendary Golden City. So stick around, there's a lot more Exo-Force sets to see, and also a ton of other themes that I can't wait to revisit too. In the meantime, have yourself a fantastic life, and I'll see you later.